Good morning. Fred in Alaska is, it's I don't know, low 30s, still dark out, pre-sunrise, so that means it's before 10 a.m. Land of the midnight sun, we have the complete opposite in the wintertime. It's the trade-off. But anyway, what I wanted to share with you, the last experience, or a couple experiences I shared with the tap 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 nurse down on the peninsula, that resonated with someone, older gentleman. His name is Charles. No longer lives in Alaska, just because his doctor is outside of Alaska and he had to move for health reasons. We're going back 50 plus years. So back in the time of oil exploration, when it was in its infancy, you know, they were planning the pipeline and they were doing this kind of stuff. Charles was an engineer and he came up here. He had a home near Trapper Creek. That's where he kept his family base, and he would work up on the slope, come home, you know, that type of thing. So he had been at it for a while. The pipeline was being constructed, and at this time he was on a 3-week on, 1 week off schedule. He was in the upper echelon of what he was doing at the time, and he, you know, he had to dedicate his time. He was trying to build something for his family, right? This particular cabin they lived in, his wife, they had 2 daughters during this time he was up here. And when his daughters were 5 and 6, he was on one of his week off trips home, and they lived in a 2-story A-frame style little house. Imagine a little Monopoly house, double the size, you know, height-wise. You know, simple 2-bedroom, kitchen and little living area downstairs. Very, very simple, nothing extravagant. He said that when he built the place, the girls' bedroom, it was loft style. Not really loft style. It was a room on one end of the A-frame and another room on the other end. And for him and his wife, they could barely sit up in their room. But the girls' room, you know, was just right for them. But that window in their room was 10 feet off the ground. He said he was in, it was the second day of one of these trips home. And when he was home, he was dedicated dad. He made sure to read to his daughters, encourage them, you know, the fundamentals of learning and everything like that. It was very important to him because he came from academia. He was an engineer. He, you know, respected the educational system back then. So, second night home, his daughters loved it because he would read bedtime stories. The first night he was home, he heard something that kind of, he didn't necessarily believe, but he believed his daughter's imagination, because they told him, well, for the last while, he asked how long, and they couldn't really elaborate because they were a little too young, but they were telling him that there was a scary man that would visit their window and try to talk to them. And so he was like, a scary man, huh? Well, tell me about this scary man. And they would say he tries to tell us to come outside and play with them, that they had kids that wanted to play with us, and just weird stuff. But the way they were saying it, he didn't feel like they were being coached to say it that way, and he knew his wife wasn't going to fill their daughter's head with, you know, fanciful crap. So he was a little intrigued. So let's move forward to the second night he was home. It was shortly before the kids were going to be going to bed. And from what he said, he was drinking coffee and looking at some blueprints. Again, he was an engineer, so he, you know, there's a lot of math involved. He was doing a lot of equations on certain pumps and various things, right? He said he was really enthralled in his work and he was very focused on it, and he heard squeals upstairs and thought maybe the girls were playing, laughing, or whatever. He hears squeals again, kind of ignores it, and he hears a weird noise outside, and he's like, there was some small raspberry bushes right up next to the house, wild raspberries, right? And he thought it was a breeze blowing, making this weird like vegetation against the outside of a house, you know, a tree moving on the outside of the house. And he chalked it up to that, right? Because he was so focused, there was no reason for him to think anything else, right? So a little time passes, there's some more squeals, so he's like, all right, I need to get the girls to bed so I can focus on my work. I gotta head back to work. I gotta have certain things ready to go. So he decides, you know, he tells his wife, hey, I'm gonna go up and get them to bed. And, you know, his wife didn't complain. She was like, yeah, they're, you know, they're overtired, but they got that anxious energy of being overtired, as some kids do. Well, he said he gets upstairs, and again, it is a very small little 2-story A-frame style house. You know, it was like a 12-12 pitch. It was very, you know, it wasn't big. He just was trying to get by, make his money, and then take his family out of state, you know, whatever. Well, he said when he got upstairs, he had to hunch down real low, and he gets over and he turns his back to this window. This window, he said it was only about 2.5 feet wide and maybe 3 foot tall. It wasn't very big in, you know, just to fit in that space. They were some old windows he had picked up somewhere used, and this place was basically piecemealed together, but efficient. So he sits there, he calms them down. He's like, what are you guys squealing so much for? You know, you guys are making a lot of noise. You guys need to start calming down for bed. And they were saying, well, that man was outside trying to talk to us. Again, he was just like, okay, what does this man look like? And they start explaining to him that his face was gray, had black hair, and big teeth. And sometimes his eyes would glow red. And so he's like, that's descriptive. You know, they were very well, descriptive in their explanation. Like they had studied this. It wasn't just a on-the-fly random response. Oh, he looked like, you know, Frosty the Snowman or whatever. It was not like that. They were very descriptive, and it really intrigued him. And he was actually initially a little proud, like, oh, my girls are so smart. They're, you know, they got, you know, they're learning how to describe things. They're using their imagination in such a way. It's awesome to see, right? Let me turn that heater down. So they go on talking or whatever, and he kind of dismisses what they're saying about this man because he already chalked it up to imagination and left it at that. So he's sitting there proud of his girls and their imagination, right? And you know, he takes a moment. He was in his own head from what he was saying, just thinking back over the past few years and what the girls have been through, and he was welling up with pride that, you know, they seem to be very intelligent, right? And so he grabs this book that he had been reading. It was an old Reader's Digest book full of different stories, and so he was just exposing them, not to little fanciful, you know, fairy tales and stuff, but like real life stories. And this particular volume was stories from the woods and adventure type stories, right? And so he finds the book, and he was like, where were we at? And the girls get quiet, and they're looking, what appeared to be looking directly at him, but something was off. He could tell something was off. They got very quiet, and they got closer to each other like they were scared. And so he was like, hey, I'm just gonna read. You don't have to be scared of me. And they're just quiet, and they're looking right, almost like they're staring through him, right? And they're 5 and 6. Things went weird real fast, and he started feeling like he was being watched. And as he's standing, or as he's sitting there, because you got to understand, it's pretty narrow. Him and his wife have to hunch over to get into their bed. You know what I mean? It was real tight space. And so he kind of adjusts himself and turns to look at the window. And as he's turning, he notices movement out that window, right? And immediately he jumps like damn near out of his skin. He said he banged his head. He snatched the girls, drug him over to the stairway, you know, made him go down the little narrow stairway downstairs, and he goes into his room, retrieves a firearm, comes downstairs, grabs a flashlight, goes around outside, right? And there is the rustling against the house he had heard earlier. What it was a spruce tree that had been broken off and quasi used as a ladder, of what it appeared. That's what he was assuming, because this thing had branches broken off all on one side, and it appeared ladder-like the way it was leaned up against the house. And it really threw him off. He was like, what the hell am I, there's a man stalking my family. So immediately he's on it, right? Well, at this particular time, there was no cell phones, you know what I mean? He didn't know really anybody nearby, just a couple people at a local store way down the road, many miles. So, you know, he was basically on his own. So he sees this, he goes back inside, gets his wife and tells her, hey, you keep the kids inside, you grab the shotgun, you stay in here. Something made a ladder out of a tree and was staring in the girl's window. Wife was dumbstruck, like, what are you talking about? And he goes, I don't know, I think it has to do with their you know, they've been talking about this man coming to their window asking them to come play with their kids, right? So she's just kind of like, okay, yeah, I heard them talking about that, but I thought they were just being creative little girls, you know, imagination running wild. He said, there's something to it. There was movement. Just get in there, you know, hold the shotgun. Listen for me. I'll announce myself. Don't shoot me, but I'm gonna find this person. Excuse me. So he grabs a flashlight. He is on the hunt for this. I'll leave what he was thinking out of it, but this person stalking his family, he was gonna end them. There was no going back from this in his mind. He goes around the property, he's looking, and this property is barely cleared enough to put this little cabin into, right? And I mean, it's about 20 feet away from it or whatever, but it's a real small area. And so he's looking, and this is before snowfly and all that kind of stuff. It was early fall from what he was saying. Now, he's going around, he's looking, he's not seeing anything, it's dead quiet outside. And he's like, all right, whoever it was, I scared him off. I'll keep my eyes and ears open. I won't ignore any weird noises outside. I'll let it go. He commences to calm everyone down inside, talk to the girls a little bit more about this man and what he was saying. And he was like, how do you talk to him? Does he talk through the window? Because he's thinking my wife should hear it. You know, if some man is outside the window, he's kind of like, hey, why aren't you paying attention to the girls? If there's a man able to talk to them, where are you during this? And they were just, the girls were young, so they couldn't articulate exactly how they were communicating with this creature. You know what I mean? This man. So he's, I mean, he comes from, you know, higher learning. You know, he's an engineer. He went through a lot of schooling, and so he wasn't big on fanciful stuff. You know, he was, you know, by the books kind of guy. Just by the nature of his job and the field he took up, he was very, you know, meticulous. This has to be this has to be this type of, you know, mentality. So after a slight squabble with his wife, and he saw her sincerity on, hey, I would not allow some strange man to talk to our girls through their window. What the hell are you talking about? That window is so far off the ground. What are you talking about? I would hear it. And so they, you know, they squash that. The night calms down, and they finally fall asleep. And this portion of the experience, when he heard about the tap 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 on the window, he said it immediately brought all this stuff back from like 50 years ago, damn near. So he's laying in bed and he hears that tap tap tap. You know, he said the cadence when I was tapping on the window gave him chills, because it brought everything back. Everything came back, and he woke up to this tapping, and immediately he's got his gun and he's going into his girl's room, because there's little half doors, you know, that they would go into their individual rooms, and actually only the girls had a half door. He had some old beads hanging and whatnot, right? And so He comes out, you know, the girl's door was always kept cracked, if not halfway open, you know, just for their, you know, security, so they felt safe, like mom and dad's right there, right? So he comes into the room, he's got a flashlight, he's hunched, and he was trying to be as quiet as he could. And he hears the tapping again. And this time it wasn't on the window, it was on the actual structure of the house next to the window. So he beams that light, right? He said that when he hit the flashlight, there was a very sheer type of cloth, not really a curtain, it was very sheer kind of cloth hanging over the window. And when he beamed the light, the sheer cloth allowed enough light through that he saw eye shine looking back at him, and then it disappeared. So immediately he's like, what the fuck? He downstairs, right out the door. He said when he got outside, he didn't give a shit at this time. He said he was guns a-blazing. Literally, he came outside, saw movement, and it was bam, 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 bam. Like, you know what I mean? You don't play with a man's kids. So as he's unloading, like he mag dumped on this thing as it was running off into the trees. It didn't occur to him, and then once he was empty, he went to reload and go look. You know, he didn't give a shit. The hairy man wasn't even on his whatever. You know, he in his mind's eye at the time, the eye shine was just a dude. He didn't realize the significance. You know, he said it was like you see an old photo of somebody, that kind of eye shine. You know, it was very, very vivid through that sheer window covering. He gets back inside. His wife is freaking the fuck out. She was still asleep, and all of a sudden he's outside fucking boom, 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 dumping rounds, right? So she said, what the hell's going on, Charles? What the hell's going on? He's like, calm down. That fucker was at the window. You know, he was, you know, tapping on the window. And she's freaking out. She's like, oh my God, you know, this is real. We're being stalked. My husband's a smart guy. He's not going to just be fucking off in the Thule shooting at motherfuckers, you know? And so he gets inside. He's reloading his pistol. He gets a hunting rifle he retrieved from upstairs, 30-06, open sights, no scope. And he sat in the dark downstairs. He told his wife, take the girls to our room, stay away from the window. You guys stay up there, you keep the shotgun. I'm gonna wait for this thing to come back. Nothing happens, nothing happens. It gets light enough outside to where he doesn't need a flashlight. He starts his hunt, right? He goes outside, and again, there was no tree leaning against the house this time. And he was like, okay, so it came and removed it, right? So he's looking around for this tree. It had been taken out of the area. He couldn't see it easily. He was worried about this person that he shot at. Now, the direction this thing ran was away from any form of civilization or road. It took off in a direction, a westerly direction, that at the time there was nothing back there but muskegs and trees and, you know, whatnot. This was sitting in a river. So he was like, all right, it must be a vagrant camping nearby, and maybe a pedo or something like that, trying to lure my kids out. You know, he was like, all right, I got a few more days on this leave, and then I'll have no way to protect my family, so I gotta get this figured out. He felt the crunch, the pressure of time, right? So he straight out goes to the trees where he saw this thing last as he was shooting at it, and he's looking for signs of blood, tracks, what have you. And he wasn't a tracker, he wasn't an outdoorsy kind of guy. He was just in Alaska to make money as an engineer in the oil field, right? It is what it is. And so he's looking, he sees a few broken branches, and kind of can, in his mind's eye, he can kind of make out this trail, and then he notices a game trail a little further, so he follows that, right? Now, as he's going about this, he has this 30-06, and I believe it was old Colt 1911 45, right? Single stack mag, 7 rounds. Anyway, So that's what he had going in. He had one extra mag, had that loaded, had a handful of bullets in his pocket for the 30-06, and had that fully loaded. So in his mind's eye, he was ready, you know, loaded for bear, loaded for whatever. He was going to get this creep staring in his kid's window. He said he got approximately maybe 100 yards down this game trail, and he starts noticing these tracks. He said the tracks, he put his foot up next to it and then measured how much of his foot to complete the track. It was 1.5 of his, you know, his shoe imprints next to this foot to make one of it, right? And so he made a mental note of that, and that's where he stopped looking, because this track was a human-like bare footprint. He said it had to have been every bit of 7 to 8 inches wide at the heel, and, you know, much more than that at the ball of the foot. He said it was very pronounced. He could see one clearly because of the conditions of the terrain. Then the other one was kind of obscured because of branches and twigs kind of breaking up its outline in the mud and whatnot. And then the next one up was pretty clear, and so on. So he studied these a minute and realized, I'm dealing with something, a very big guy. Hairy man, Bigfoot, he wasn't even thinking about that, right? So he retreats back and he tells his wife, whoever this is huge, very, very big. And his wife brings up, you know, a month ago, I could have swore I saw a very large figure in the tree line, but it was too big to be a man, and I thought I was seeing things, because when I looked again out the kitchen window or whatever it wasn't there anymore. So I thought I was seeing things. I thought I was imagining shadows. And he goes, look, the footprint is huge. We're not going to leave the girls alone. We're not going to take them with us to go look at these, but they are one complete shoe print and a half of mine, which equated to almost 18 inches, right? So he's like, this thing is huge. It was his wife that brought up Bigfoot. And he was kind of thrown off, like, what do you mean Bigfoot? And she goes, well, this is Alaska. This is wild. This is more wild than the Pacific Northwest, where, you know, these stories are coming out of at the time of Bigfoot. And he dismisses it right away. You know, even though he saw the track, he just... you know, he's like, that's just whatever, you know, that's just crap for TV, you know. Well, as the day progresses from the morning he saw these tracks, he gets deeper and deeper in thought, and they decide they're gonna go, and he's gonna go to Anchorage with his family and put them up in a hotel and get one of his buddies from work who is also on leave and go back out to his cabin and take a good look around. So he gets down to Anchorage. He finds his buddy. He had been drinking a little bit, you know, on his off time. He didn't have a family or whatever, but he tracked him down, right? Red light district, old school Anchorage. Anyway, pulls him out of whatever strip club he was in when he found him, and had him drinking coffee on the way out. And he was explaining to his friend, who was a native. This particular native gentleman was from the Bristol Bay area. He gave me his name and everything like that, but the guy has since passed, and I'm not gonna... It's his native friend, right? So on the drive out, he's explaining to his friend as he's sobering up, drinking coffee and stuff, because he wasn't polluted, but he had been drinking, you know. So anyway, he explains to him, hey, here's what I had happen, this, that, and the other, and nonchalantly his friend says, oh, that's the hairy man. The hairy man was trying to get your kids, man. That's not good. And he was like, what the fuck are you talking about, man? The hairy man. And he explains to him, you know, tells him what he had heard, you know, about the hairy man, and, you know, they got big footprints. They usually, you know, they'll steal your women and children, yada yada. So he's just perplexed. It wasn't registering in Charles' mind, because he had never had anything like this going on, right? It just wasn't in his wheelhouse. So he gets out there. His friend gets there with him, of course. You know, when his friend gets there, his friend immediately starts going in this big circle around the house, not praying or anything, just looking for sign, looking for tracks. He found the same trackway that Charles had seen and starts following it, right? Totally unarmed. He just, he just started doing his thing. So Charles is behind him, armed, about 20 yards behind him, saying, hey, wait for me, wait for me. And he was like, let's follow these tracks, let's follow them. They get down towards this little creek area. He said it opened up, but the brush was hanging real low over the mud, but his friend was squatted down looking under the brush into the mud. And he, when Charles comes up, he asks, what are you looking at? Do you find more tracks? And he goes, yeah. So what his friend does is he steps in, puts his arm under the brush and lifts up to where all this overhang was lifted out of the way, and he could see smaller tracks with the bigger tracks right next to this creek, which was a few hundred yards from his house. And Charles is blown away. Charles said that you could have pushed him over with a pinky. He was so dumbfounded by the reality of what was going on, right? And he asked his friend, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? So he says, tell me again what happened. He lays it all out. Girls are telling me this. I end up shooting at this thing. It runs off, yada yada. He goes, I don't know, but I'm off for 2 weeks. I still have a whole other week, and you have to go back. I can stay, and I can keep, at least have a man here to help keep your family safe. And he immediately agreed after seeing the tracks and all this stuff, right? So there's 1 week covered, but he's on for 3 weeks, and so he's really, really worried. So he starts calling his bosses and stuff and trying to work out while his friend is there for the week, his initial week back. That week will give him enough time to work out the problems, but he wants to take some leave after that, right? And so he said it was a little bit of a back and forth, but he got it worked out with another buddy who was going to be rotating out to stay another week. So he would have to go back for a week, but then he'd have 2 weeks after that to tend to what was going on around his house. And he sure as hell wasn't sharing that with anyone at work because he didn't want to get fired for being a loony. So he said the week he had to be away for his job, nothing substantial happened. It was very quiet. When his friend came in, his friend actually came in an hour before he was going out, because he was leaving the slope on the same plane his friend came back in as it did its turnaround. Had to refuel, clean it out, whatever, just that pause in between flying there and flying back. So he had a few minutes to talk to him, and his friend was like, nothing happened. There was it got quiet a few times outside when I was, doing whatever, but there was no activity of any kind, and he goes, I think, maybe shooting at it scared it off for good. So he's a little relieved, but he still takes his 2 weeks. He goes home, and during this time, during his 2 weeks, he said it was very stressful because he couldn't enjoy being where he was with his family anymore. He said when they first were living there and stuff, it was just happy, family's good, family's safe, they were ready for bears and moose and shit. But this changed everything for him, and he couldn't look at this place he loved the same anymore, which is fucking sad shit. So what he ends up doing is moving his family to Anchorage. Moved them to South Anchorage during that 2 weeks off. Had them pack the most important stuff. They didn't have a whole lot in this little house. He was just trying to build money for them to go, back where they're from. So anyway, they buttoned down the hatches, so to speak. That friend of his that came out, offered to look out for the place or whatever. So he moved his family to Anchorage during that 2 weeks. He said the last night he was there, because he had to drive out, and he had a flat tire and it got late, so he was just going to stay at the house one last night and then go back to Anchorage with the last little bit of stuff, right? He said he woke up to that tapping. He could hear it upstairs at the window. He heard it like 5 or 6 times, 3 taps, tap, 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 and he just laid there quiet. He said because initially it was messing with his girls when he saw the eye shine and ran out. He said knowing the tracks he saw, he could not, with his girls gone and nothing to protect really but himself, he said he could not fathom jumping up and running outside to accost this thing. He had already, that ship has sailed. You know what I mean? He said that he felt like a coward initially, and then he thought about it and was like, no, I'm doing what's right for my family. I can't be here to protect them all the time. I can't mess up my work schedule like I just did. You know, it puts my job in jeopardy, and that's really not gonna, you know, protect my family. From what Charles said, he was highly triggered by me tapping on the window when I was sharing that one experience with you guys a couple videos back. Tap tap tap. It inspired him. I've been helping family do some stuff. I barely got sleep last night because of the phone calls and stuff. I had to. I made the time for him. He's much older than me, and he's trying his best to reach out. So this is from the Trapper Creek area, damn near 50 years ago, okay? But it was important for him to share. He had never, outside of his friend that came, he ain't shared with anybody. Charles, I appreciate you sharing. I will make sure we put a mark on the map near Trappers Creek. And I sincerely thank you for sharing the experience you went through. You know, he got emotional a couple times, which I totally understand, because he wanted to protect his kids. And, you know, for a lot of people, they don't realize what an experience like this can do. That's why when I hear from people say, I want to have an encounter. No, you don't. I mean, it sounds good and it looks good on paper, but when reality, you know, rubber meets the road, so to speak, it's not what you think. It's a lot more traumatizing than you might realize. Yeah, because, you know, you're looking at something that's not supposed to exist, and it kind of messes with you for a few days. Anyway, but I want to thank Charles for reaching out. He felt it very important to get that out. And also I'm going to have some telephonic interviews coming up soon. One of them will be Mike from the first Voices from the Village. He'll be back with us, and also another person who will remain anonymous. I'll talk to him this Thursday. We'll record Friday. Multiple encounters. It's not uncommon as you would think. The issue is people don't talk about it. People don't speak about it. They don't want to be the nut job. They don't want to be the weirdo, you know, the Bigfoot guy, blah blah. You know, they don't want that shit. Which, me, I'm beyond it. I don't give a fuck, you know, what anyone thinks. It's irrelevant to me. There's people that are lost jobs, lost family relationships. I'm one of them. It's beyond just a story. People's lives are messed with over this shit. Anyway, thank you guys for joining me. More to come, and I thank you for your time. Catch you on the next one.